Welcome to Doc's Daily Dose for Dads, prescribed by Dr. Harrison. Okay, so my oldest son, he had what they called ERB testing. It's similar to the PSAT. I mean, anybody who went to elementary school, you remember it. They took 3 or 4 days out of the week. You went in, you sat down, paper and pencil, you took the test. It didn't really mean anything except for the numbers of the school in terms of their funding or where their kids were at. And I mean, it was just one of those things you did. Everybody did it growing up. I did it all the way throughout elementary, middle school, high school as well, and then I ended up taking SAT and ACT, to go to college. So it's something we all have in common. Now, the interesting thing about my son's school was they asked me if we wanted, or they asked the parents, I guess, if we wanted to see the test scores. And of course, I'm curious. I want to see where my son falls along the normal distribution, the average of America, the average of, the national average, as well as the independent private school average. That's how they broke these test scores down. There was the national average and where they fell, and then where they fell in the independent private school average, which is typically higher by a pretty good percentage with respect to the national average, okay? So I said, yeah, sure, I want to see it. Forgot all about it afterwards. When he had the testing going on, he was excited about it. He was like, yeah, we've been talking about it in class and how you get prepared. And we made sure he got some good night's sleep. And I made him a nice breakfast in the morning, wished him good luck, but never really put a bunch of emphasis like you have to do really well on this. Because what does it mean for a third grader? What does his test scores mean? They don't mean anything, right? It has no bearing on his future whatsoever. Now, you want to talk about the actual SAT and ACT and your kid wants to go to college? Different story. But for a third grader, come on. It really doesn't mean shit. But anyways, the scores came back in just the other day. And I was like, oh, I totally forgot about this. I'm curious to see how he did. And so I opened it up. And now some of those things can be hard to read. But because I worked in admissions for a private school, and I got to see how that distribution and those scores and percentiles, and they call it Stay 9 scores, how that all works, I was very familiar with it. And so I was like, okay, well, here are all the categories for the testing. Wow, he's above average here. He's average there. And whoa, he's kind of below average there. And for a minute, I started to freak out. I started to be like, well, why is this below average or this average? And compared to the national norm versus compared to the private school norm, is he ahead in this and behind in that? Like, what do we have to do here? And then I just laughed to myself while I was sitting on the couch going down this rabbit hole. I just out loud started laughing like, really? Come on, bro. It's third grade. It's not that serious. But you know me. I'm not always talking about mindset stuff here. I'm talking about actual activities and behaviors. So I thought to myself, well, if I was going to share this with people who are watching, what is the point that I want to make besides the fact that it doesn't mean shit in third grade? The question came to me, well, should you tell him about his scores? And I think you can go either way on this. But my answer, no. Don't say anything. Don't even bring it up that you got the scores back. For what? Okay? Now, for me, it's simply that the cons outweigh the pros. For me, the pros, well, if they did really well, they feel really good about themselves, right? I'm a smart kid. Wow, look how awesome I am compared to everyone else. Or if they didn't do too hot, maybe it motivates them to really bust their butt in school to do even better for that stuff. Those are the two big pros I see for this. But the cons, the bad stuff, a false sense of confidence or being overconfident, comparing themselves to others, thinking about how much better they are than everyone else, especially at that young age. You know how kids do it. I mean, hell, adults even, but kids especially, they blow things out of proportion. I mean, it's like, oh my God, I'm in the highest percentile. I'm way better than everybody else. What about a lowered self-esteem? What if they didn't do too hot? And all of a sudden they feel like I'm a dummy. I'm stupid, right? Especially if they're getting a ton of pressure from their parents to raise that up. And they're thinking to themselves, I tried really hard on this. Also, what if they don't do too well on tests, but they do really well in class, right? Like, we all know people like that what could get anxious during testing, or they're just poor test takers. They don't have that skill. Or maybe the stuff that's covered on the test is not the same way it was taught to them in the classroom. Who knows? There's all kinds of reasons for why they maybe didn't do so well. Also, that puts more emphasis, if you tell them, it puts more emphasis on this exam than there needs to be for a third grader. Who cares about their score? Unless they're just like at 0 percentile, they're the worst of the worst in every single category, where you might say like we might have a learning disability or a learning issue here, or maybe we've got some sort of problem where we have to find a different way to teach this person for them to, acquire information and knowledge, or, apply the skills that are being taught. But other than that, why put all that emphasis on that test and pressure on that kid in third grade? It could just simply potentially be more damaging, right? And if they do really well in class and they get really good grades in class, well then, what are we worrying about this national test for that isn't really going to tell us much, especially when most of these tests have huge holes with respect to validity in them. I mean, huge, huge holes across cultures, across genders, across regions, socioeconomic status, race, all that stuff. And you can say all that, or you can just simply talk about the fact that maybe it's not valid and that you take the test, one time and then you take it again and you don't get the same score and it's vastly different. All kinds of different red flags there. But despite all of that, there just seems to be more negative than there is positive to telling them about that score in third grade. And I'd rather just not do that to them. So that doesn't mean that you can't take the areas they're weak in and help them with that stuff. And just be like, hey, this summer I really want to work on this with you. Let's do this to kind of keep our skills up for school the next year. Or, hey, I found this software program that's really cool and fun for kids, when it's about reading comprehension, right? Or, let's play this math game with dice and multiplication facts. And that it's because they scored pretty low on their math portion of their test, so you want to really build that skill up. But you don't have to be like, well, you got to do this because you did bad on quantitative reasoning, and you have to do this because you did horrible on reading comprehension, and you can't be falling behind these kids because your future is going to be, you're going to be held up. You won't go to college, you won't get a good job, and then you're going to be lazy, and you're going to be on, welfare, and you won't have anything going for you, and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. It's a bunch of bullshit, okay? So don't do that to them. Don't do that to them. Help them if you want to help them in their weaker areas. Even talk to the school with their learning resources and say, where can we get some extra help here, right? But with respect to the score, there's simply no reason to tell them. And if you are ego-driven because the kid did so well that you want to pump their ego up because your ego is inflated, we got a whole nother issue. Because guess what? There's always someone bigger, faster, stronger, and better and smarter out there. And if a kid has a false sense of confidence with an inflated ego, when that shit gets popped, it's a long, long fall and a hard, hard crash. And I don't want that for my boys. That's Doc's Daily Dose for Dads. Don't forget to hashtag Doc's Daily Dose for Dads, hashtag 4D. Hit the subscribe button. All social media at rebirthbx, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music. Check out the website, rebirthbx.com. I'm going to go hang out with my son and not worry about the test scores that just came in, because they don't mean shit. I'll talk to you tomorrow.